Welcome to Logistics Business Conversations, the podcast exploring the ideas and insights shaping today's logistics industry. Featuring leading voices from across the sector, we examine key trends, emerging challenges, and the innovations driving the future of supply chains.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world, and welcome to the latest Logistics Business Conversations podcast. My name is Peter MacLeod, and it's my great pleasure to host this podcast. This episode is called The Rise of Hybrid WMS, Rethinking Warehouse Technology, and I'm delighted to be joined now for a third time by Smitha Rafael, who's Chief Product and Delivery Officer at cloud warehouse management system provider Synergy. Hello again, Smitha, and welcome back to Logistics Business Conversations.
Hi, Peter. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm glad to be back.
It's great to have you here. Now, we're going to be discussing hybrid WMS. I'm afraid you're going to have to explain to me and our listeners, what do we mean by hybrid WMS?
Yep, absolutely. So hybrid WMS essentially is where you're looking at hosting your warehouse management system on site, on edge devices. And the reason I say on edge devices as opposed to the old on-prem scenario is because now you've got to have various other entities. There may be AI agents, you may be running containers, Kubernetes clusters, etc., a whole spiel things on these devices. But essentially running that on site per warehouse, but then having replication to the cloud for disaster recovery. So if, for instance, something went wrong with a device or for some reason, both devices, your first device and your backup device on site, you still have the cloud for replication as well, where you could run not just multi-warehouse overview dashboards or reports, etc., but if there was a disaster, you could again run your warehouse operations from the cloud if you needed to as well.
So what does this actually mean in practical warehouse terms for your customer, Smitha?
As we've seen a number of outages that have happened this past quarter, last year as well, and warehouse customers have experienced quite a bit of disruption in their operations. Having a hybrid WMS means you're not dependent on the cloud, you're not dependent on possibly any external networks. Cybersecurity is a big element these days with the state of affairs. And so that mitigates the risk as well. So having a WMS that you have full control of on site, you have it running on edge devices, your backup is on edge devices, and you've got DR to the cloud, kind of means customers are a little more secure in knowing that their operations run minimal risk of disruption.
Now, warehouse resilience is something that's become a huge talking point, particularly lately. I wonder what's changed. Is downtime now more of a boardroom issue than just like an IT issue? Is it fair to say?
Definitely. I think speaking with customers and potential customers, just even last month when we were at Modex, there were decision makers coming up and asking about security, about resilience. The number of cyber incidents that have happened is incredible. And now with the onset of AI, one has to be even more vigilant because you are kind of letting in external or probably even exposing your data out in the open. And so I think it's become an issue that C-suite executives, managers, etc., have all brought up, just because you could definitely see your bottom line impacted when there is a disruption in your warehouse operation. Also thinking about this is really interesting, a note that somebody brought up last month in Modex as well, that it's not just your operations, you could probably hobble around, get through it and make up, your order volumes, etc. But it's also your reputation. It's really difficult to get your reputation back, because when their customers lose faith, it's kind of tough then.
Yeah, there's certain knock-on effects here, aren't there? You've lost your productivity, you've lost that as you say, that customer goodwill. You've also, I guess, you've stranded capital as well. You've got assets locked in within the business that are not earning for you. So I wonder what the actual cost is of a downtime, and whether that can be formally measured.
It's funny that you mentioned this, because we actually brought out a report recently, just get feedback from the industry regarding, if shipping breaks, or, your warehouse pays for it. Warehouse operations breaks, again, the warehouse pays for it. And so now you're having to add on not just additional resilience in terms of additional networks or a higher military grade security system, and things like that. But there's definitely a downtime cost per hour, which is pretty high. I think 30% of the people that we asked about this very issue said that it's easily anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 per hour. And that's, again, a small subset. So you can just imagine, enterprise grade customers, or bigger ones, who are probably bigger targets even, having to go through that.
That report you reference, warehouse resilience and downtime, you say 30% of the people know the cost of their downtime. It also reveals that 70% of those who interview don't actually measure their downtime. So it's an unknown quantity for them.
That's why Orca, our hybrid WMS, with this past year and a half that we've been working on, has been so crucial. Is that what we found was that with the onset of AI, funnily enough, customers want to bring on AI to, measure productivity and what they can do and forecast, etc. And it's very obvious, whether you use AI or a dashboard like the dashboards we provide, that if there was an outage, you can see the blip on your graph immediately. The shipping volume goes down, receiving, all your tasks in the warehouse put away, replenishment, everything, carrier pickups, all of that just goes down. And then if you were to look at the monthly financial output from that, it's, quarter by quarter, again, it's very obvious that, both correlate. So I think it's interesting, you may not luckily have experienced downtime or an outage, but with the way things are going, you see them more and more each day.
I would recommend our listeners to download the report from the Synergy website. It's 30 pages of good stuff, I will say. Something that caught my eye in there, one of the most interesting findings was described that partial outages can be as damaging as complete shutdowns. Something which is termed as degraded operation. Why is that such a dangerous grey zone, Smitha?
Yes, absolutely. Well, so if you think about a full outage, everything's down. You're not trying to get a part of your system or part of your operations working through a bit of it. Also anticipate, well, the system just came back up. I can start using the system, but then it goes right back down, right? Uh-huh. So a partial cloud outage or any outage, if you're not sure it's happened completely, you always try to use the system the moment you see it come back on. And that's more dangerous, because now you've got some of your data in your system that's gone through the system during, whatever, a 30-minute window of time when the system was up. But then the rest, again, it goes down, and then the rest is now on paper. So that's one. The second is your warehouse operators. The frustration and the communication isn't very clear during a partial outage, because at that point, you're telling your warehouse operators, your customers, hey, we're back up, things are flowing. But then again, within 30 minutes, if you're back down again, it sends really mixed messages to your warehouse operators and customers, and people just At that point, they'd rather just be on plain old paper, knowing that paper's not going to go away for the day. And then so yeah, partial outages are pretty bad, not only for data, but also get for your workers as well.
I imagine with the sort of the increase in automation that we're seeing across the warehousing sector, downtime is becoming exponentially more, affected by, or should I say, operations becoming more exponentially affected by downtime. Is that a trend?
Yeah, so with the onset of automation, and automation relies heavily on resilient networks, it also creates an environment where, an actual human being just has one job and they very monotonously do it because the rest of the automation's doing all the other pieces. Now, when automation goes down, you have to now essentially be prepared for your users now to pick up the work that the automation was doing, plus what they were doing, and all of that has to be seamless. Apart from that, if you have a system for whatever reason, maybe your WMS didn't go down, one of the things we have built in with all our integrations is a backup. If your automation went down, you should be able to switch over to your WMS RF picking seamlessly. And that's important as well, because at the end of the day, your WMS is the holder of all the data, be it the automation maybe acting upon it, it's being fed orders from the WMS. It's enacting, various things. So if the automation does go down, your WMS needs to be able to pick up from where it left off. Picking, packing, all of that needs to continue through the WMS, seamlessly.
So if, for example, the cloud disappears, is there certain sort of local continuity that ensures that things can keep moving? And what are those parts that can still keep moving locally?
It actually depends on what parts of your system, are hosted in cloud.
Sure.
Now, let's just say if everything is and things go down, your WMS still has the data required. You can pull out the data through internal networks, through your intranet, and run, whether it's on paper or even if your WMS, like I mentioned, the hybrid WMS, if there were intranets that your WMS could fail over to, then that would be the other solution. But there's always a way, because at the end of the day, if you think about it, yeah, all your systems provide you efficiency, but data is the most important. Having that data, however painful it may be to do, huge scale picking and putting away replenishments that are not probably system driven, you could do it on paper, but it's not ideal.
Sure. You mentioned Orca as the launched product that you were showing the world for the first time recently at Modex. Is it essentially just an insurance policy for warehouse execution, or does it add operational value even when everything is running smoothly?
A big part of Orca is it being hosted on edge devices. So cybersecurity, we've got military grade like security, you've got disaster recovery cloud, edge devices that will run AI agents locally as well. So one of the other pieces to Orca are the fact that it caters to essentially multi-site warehouses where you can have your WMS per warehouse on the devices on site and everything replicates to the cloud. But also what we brought out are AI agents, and not just for dashboards. We definitely have that with our Reveal self-service dashboard. We now have AI insights that will give you a summary analysis, etc. Can also edit and create dashboards, but also we've created AI agents that will actually take action. So it isn't, here's your exception, now Mr. Warehouse Manager, go do something about it. we've decided these are the exceptions a warehouse manager at the start of their shift, would look at and then acts upon it. So what we've done is we've taken those actions, things like prioritizing maybe a receiving dock or replenishment to get an at-risk shipment out, or for example, how many operators do you have? You've got these type of orders that only can be done by these sorts of operators. So move around operator permission so that they get that chunk of work. So there's those as well. And then the third one that we added, apart from agents and the hybrid WMS piece of it, is automation. So we've put in a number of standard connectors and messages. So in a warehouse, standard messages, pick, pack, transfer, all of these, whether it's replenishment or whatever it may be, falls into these categories. And so we've standardized those. And what that means is bringing on or integrating automation to Orca would be even faster than it may be now, just because of the standard functions that have been put in there for an automated warehouse.
Are you adding complexity for local IT teams, or does Orca actually sort of help to simplify the risk management aspect of their job description?
I would say when we talk about deployment at this point, it is really where we would provide the software installs, etc. So that box on site, so as an example, if you think about an NVIDIA Spark device, would have everything you need to run your WMS, which is any integrations, agents, dashboards, actual system, connectivity to the RF devices. And this would be 2 devices, right? So it's a backup for your first device if anything were to happen over there. So there may be a slight, IT requirement in terms of, here's the device, it has everything, now plug it in, but as long as we have connectivity through a VPN to the device, everything else would be managed by our support teams, any maintenance. Currently, we work with our cloud providers for any maintenance that needs to be done. This would be a matter of working directly with the device on site.
How can I put this in language that I understand, let alone anyone else? I know my way around a forklift truck, but you're a little bit of the black arts on the software side, so forgive me if I fumble with my questions here. But I'm just trying to get my head around, building resilience into existing warehouse operations. Is it possible to sort of retrofit into those operations resilience, for example, versus building it in sort of from day one?
One of the things I will say a warehouse operation should always think about is, a backup to your primary internet. You'd be surprised how many warehouse operations have the one network provider, and if that provider actually had an outage or was doing maintenance in your area or whatever it may be, then you're out of luck. So I think the very first step is really making sure that you do have a backup internet provider for any failovers. And then the other piece is, if you were looking at moving from AWMS, whichever it may be, to a hybrid WMS, the one thing you would see is really how easy is it to deploy the application as a package onto a device and be up and running. It should not really require a whole re-engineering of infrastructure or anything, as long as you have, intranet at your facility, which most organizations do have that, you should be fine.
So if you're advising a warehouse operator today, I'm not going to do any role playing. I think we're too grown up for that. But we'll say, what would be the 3 resilience questions they should be asking their WMS provider?
I think the first one really is, what is your failover strategy if you are a cloud provider or on-prem? What is the failover strategy if the cloud went down? Second is, how soon would you be able to actually switch over? you don't want an entire like half a day to go by while your provider is trying to switch you over to your failover cloud or failover database, whatever it may be. It should be instantly. So one of the things you definitely want to check with your providers, how often do you do failover tests and what are the results of those? And then the last one is, if there was an outage, how quickly would we be able to bring the data back into the system if they had switched to paper for some reason? So let's say, it was an absolute disaster, you had switched to paper. How quickly, number one, could they get access to their data so they could continue operations on paper? And then after that, once the systems are back up and running, what's the recovery period, right? Like all this work that was done on paper, how is that going to go back into the WMS?
In this high technology world in which we exist, it somehow pleases me to imagine people running around warehouses looking for clipboards and pens, and bits of paper. It's not efficient, but it's kind of quite grounding, I have to say.
It is. I mean, especially like when you look at people on equipment like forklifts or a cherry picker and trying to look and turn around a pallet and also try to make notes on a clipboard.
Balanced on their knees. Yeah.
And you've got to say somebody call safety, the safety department here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons you have things like wrist scanners or finger scanners or just holsters and things like that. So yeah, it is. It's minor things like that. Like no one wants to go back to paper after you've been on a system and you've seen how efficient it is. But it's almost like the worst case scenario if you don't have resiliency and recovery built into your system.
Yeah. Well, Smitha, as we reach the end of our allotted time, I've got one final question to ask you, which I ask all of our guests, and it's we could describe it as our crystal ball moment when I ask you to close your eyes and imagine the warehouse of the future. What does it look like in your imagination? And you are physically closing your eyes. I like that. And what part would you say WMS will play, and in what form, say, 5 years from now?
What's next in logistics? We're asking the experts. In our Crystal Ball segment, industry leaders share their predictions for the future.
I know everyone's really sick about hearing the word AI, but I feel AI as such has come in late into the supply chain and in particular warehousing. 2 or 3 years ago, you could hear about AI in medical, in finance, and even recently on shipping, international logistics, etc. But warehousing, all you ever heard about was dashboards, AI created dashboards, data and stuff like that. I think in the future, I expect a bigger role. I expect AI agents and AI workflows being able to not just predict a scenario or an issue based on external entities, but also being able to act upon it in terms of, well, this has happened. This is my regular rule in my WMS. This rule needs to be switched around to cater for this. And so instead of having an WMS administrator or warehouse manager, kind of perform an action after the event occurs, I anticipate AI agents would already predict that and say, tomorrow we see this shipment, these sort of shipments happening. We see your containers being delayed because of whatever, a canal being blocked or whatever. So this rule needs to change, and essentially doing it for you. And it's a good thing in a way because it frees up your resources to do high value work and not have to continuously just chase an event that's already happened.
Yeah. Well, Smitha, thank you again for your tremendous insight that you've brought to Logistics Business Conversations today. It's been a great pleasure to welcome you back as a guest. And thank you to you, the listener, for joining us today. Wherever you get your podcasts from, please subscribe to Logistics Business Conversations to make sure the next edition is delivered straight to you as soon as it's released. Until then, it's goodbye from Smitha Rafael.
Thank you, Peter. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
And it's goodbye from me, Peter MacLeod. Goodbye.